All right, guys, welcome back to Moonhawk Studios Presents. I am your host, Mac Paladin, and with me in the studio, as always, is my good friend Adam.
We seem to be lacking something this week.
We'll talk about that in a minute. Kevin's in the house.
Yep, right over here. Hi.
Petty fans around the corner.
The voices come from within the walls.
And we have the Golics.
Hello.
All right, we got a great show for you tonight. We will be talking about stuff and things, but before we get into that, let's get into the news. Adam, what's cooking?
Let's see. Discord. My old Discord account still hacked. Still not mine.
Ooh.
Discord support still useless. I'm like, it is not fun when I get a round of pings from various communication services saying, "Do you know your account's been hacked?" Yes, I know. Like, but the thing is, it's still trying to scam people.
Yep.
Yeah.
It even got to the point to where our former co-host and generally technologically inept individual Oron Darklord
Oh no, or
started making announcements on all the servers that Adam's account has been hacked. So when Oron notices it, you know that something is afoot.
Well, the thing is, as one person told me, it's not very smart because, like, it's trying to pull, scams, and it doesn't sound like me at all.
Yeah, it's like from what I've seen, it sounds like either it's a kid or it's just English isn't their first language.
Well,
possibly both.
Quite a lot of
possibly
them.
both.
Quite a lot of these, a lot of these account scammers are somewhere else. Like they're out of they're out of these massive call centers in India and Indonesia and like North Africa. Just places like that, and that I guess somebody somewhere makes some money off of this so that they keep doing this over and over and over again.
And if you get one person, to fall for it, then profit.
Yeah.
Like, the point is, it's still going, even though that account has probably been reported for spam multiple times by now. Like, I'm
just
not sure.
Deactivate the damn thing. It's like, come on, Discord, get with it.
Yeah, I'm like, and the thing is, I can't get a hold of any actual humans that work at Discord. Like, I could get a hold of like actual AOL people in like the 90s.
Well, that was a very different and magical time, Adam. I mean, people used to actually work for companies back in the 90s. That was the end of that era. Now everything's like, they warned us that automation was coming and that it was going to take all our jobs, but it is here now. Everything is these crappy AI bots.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the problem with this is it can't tell that, Adam had his account stolen. It's not somebody trying to take it from him.
Yeah, and like, here's a post that Discord put out just 6 hours ago. Apparently, they only have 15% of Discord staff on the safety team. The customer service, the division dedicated to shit like this.
Well, the
Like-
other issue that I was getting at though was that a lot of these companies, these tech companies like this, operate on minimal staffing until a crisis happens. You know, like with the hate raids on Twitch, and then this latest thing with the the whole nudity clause in their TOS and stuff. They let the robots handle everything until shit hits the fan, and then they're constantly scrambling. So Discord is no different.
Well, yeah, like Discord has been dealing with various problems of the sort for ages. Like,
Mhm.
you know, but the thing that really gets me is like there's no phone line.
Right.
Like if this happened with my Skype account, there's there's several ways to get in touch with Microsoft about this.
Right, but Microsoft is also a $3.75 trillion company, and Discord is like a $15 million company.
Like, right, but that's still no excuse for a company of this size not to have some sort of way to contact somebody when your account's been stolen.
Especially because there's been a rash of these going on for months.
Well,
Yeah.
this circles back to my original argument, and that is that companies like this, especially relatively young companies like Discord. I mean, we first heard about them in 2015 when we were talking to the Galactus people. I still have them on my original Discord account for the show. But they usually operate at bare minimum staffing for this kind of stuff.
Well, GMAC, I don't know how you expect them to make any money if they're paying people's salaries.
See, I was getting to that, but I was trying to do it delicately. So thank you for crashing Kool-Aid Man style directly into that one for me. But I think that's part of it, is the fact that we really don't know much about Discord's actual corporate structure, but it seems like they do what literally every other startup company has done, and that's that they try to operate on a shoestring budget for as long as possible to try to make some money, instead of following the adage of, you got to spend money to make money, which means, as the old Chinese proverb goes, invest in loss.
That's all well and awful, but that doesn't change the fact that I want to hit several Discord executives with a large wrench right.
Oh no, I agree. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that their sins are now laid bare. When something like this happens, you start to understand that the platform is probably getting too big for their britches. Like, for the current staffing levels, they probably are woefully understaffed for the current size of this operation. Because
it's one of those things. I don't think that when they originally made Discord, they quite imagined it becoming as predominant of a method of communication as it has.
I don't think that they expected it to fully supplant Skype.
And then Skype turned to shit.
Right,
Am I
but
wrong?
it's really
it was kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
right. But people moved to Zoom, not Discord.
Well,
It depends.
Most people did, but not everybody.
A lot of the people in suits went to like Zoom and stuff like that because they could afford it, but a lot of smaller teams went to Discord because it's free.
Right. Zoom is definitely more scalable.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really want to use it for this show anytime soon.
Oh God, no.
We got to keep our gamer street cred.
So
and I'm definitely not going back to TeamSpeak, that's for sure. Although some people still do.
So ultimate point here is my old account is still not me and still trying to scam people.
Sucks.
And you know, and yeah, there's not much I can do that I have not already done.
Mm-hmm.
So that is my news.
Yeah, it's pretty much just circle back periodically and see if anybody responds. But other than that, it's pretty.
And continue sending emails and social media messages in the vain attempt to catch somebody's attention.
Oh man, there's got to be some irony in using X to try to get the attention of Discord.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be some horrible irony there.
Probably, but I don't wish to dwell on it.
Right.
Anyway, Kevin, you're up.
Yeah.
Well, nothing really much happening except the run up to Christmas at both work and at home. The family is probably going to be coming in for family Christmas festivities here on Christmas Eve, which I will be off because it's on Sunday. And, well, we'll see how busy it is because usually Christmas isn't really too busy because, it's Christmas and everybody's at home. But, well, we'll see what happens and see how this holiday shape up because, there's really, you never know what'll happen. So. But yeah, that's what's going on here. Petty, what's going on in your world?
Not a whole lot. It's been pretty quiet over here, especially compared to the last few weeks. I'm done with all the Christmas shopping and stuff, so that's fun. And yeah, just kind of, I think I'm done with all the doctor's appointments I need to deal with for the rest of the year, so, yay, not having to go take an hour ride to the big city for a few weeks. Living in Missouri sucks.
Huh.
Specifically, rural Missouri sucks.
Welcome to Joplin.
Farther out than that, but yeah, pretty much. But we have had crews in the area laying down fiber optic for the new internet service coming to town, so hopefully we can get rid of this crappy ISP we have now and actually have, something decent. So the last timetable I got is sometime next year we should have service in our area. Whether that's, January next year or, December. Ideally January, because then we can just be done with this, crappy service and never have to deal with it again. The only thing that'll kind of suck is we'll need to get a new router because the modem router combo we have now doesn't have a mode where you can just use it as a router. So, one more round of transitioning all the devices to a new wireless network, which is always a pain in the ass, but again, need to get done. And I did have to fix my desk over the week. I have one of those, those like rolling keyboard trays. It kept coming off the track because the track part of it was loose, so I had to sort that out. So that was a pain in the ass. Hopefully it works as long as my mom's kind of large cat doesn't try to lay on it. But yeah, I think that's it from me. So next victim.
Presumably that would be me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I am still in de-stressing mode because we had a power outage that lasted like a day and a half, and I slept like crap the day before it, so combination of brain going into alternate no internet and no power operating. I mean, we have a generator, but so it's not like we didn't have water or light, but we didn't have to worry about all of our food going bad, but there's still a lot of stuff you can't do.
It's not advised to, run the computer at full burst when you don't have any, mains power.
Particularly since we didn't have internet anyway. Also, not a good idea to do laundry or use a microwave or any of that stuff. So,
Yeah.
well, specifically run the dryer more than the laundry.
Yeah. I've seen the diesel generators over at Lowe's and stuff like that, but they don't seem like something you'd want to rely on for an eternity.
Yeah, and ours isn't huge. It's also in the first day we didn't even have much gas for the generator, so I had to go scout for gas stations that were open, and frankly, almost all of them were. Thankfully, while we were part of a large outage, it was on a secondary. It was following the path of a secondary road, and most of the main road with most of the stuff on it was good, which is probably part of why it took them a day and a half to get to us. But also, it was hard to start the first night because there was a bad storm, and there are still some places where it's taking even longer because there was flooding that took out some roads and stuff. So, all things considered, I think we got off pretty light, and I don't think I'll have too much in the way of lingering mental issues from it. But
Yeah.
I'm not inclined to want to stress test how long my brain can operate on that alternate operating mode. It's not fun. So yeah, that's what I've been doing for the last few days. Unfortunately, because of that, I was not able to join Mac for strategy sessions on Monday. I don't know if he went along with it without it because I still haven't caught up with everything.
I did not.
But hopefully next weekend we won't have... Well, no, because next Monday is Christmas, and then the Monday after that is New Year's, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back to it as soon as we can. Which may be on New Year's Day, we'll see.
Hey, sorry I haven't been acknowledging the chat, guys. I tend not to during the podcast. Like, I'm much more responsive during other shows. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I just saw that. Sorry, I have other windows open and I had it covered for... But yes, I appreciate your sympathy. Yeah, it's been a rough couple of days, so I'm still readjusting to things going back to normal.
Yeah. I think after the hiatus, after the winter hiatus, I will look into being a little more responsive to chat during this. I'm not sure if I'm ever going to put the chat on the screen, but we have
that's asking for trouble, especially with stuff like this.
Right, but I think it's like experimenting with features such as like integrating video clips and stuff from our guests into the podcast is definitely stuff I want to do. So giving shout outs and occasionally acknowledging the chat is definitely something that we're going to look into at some point in the foreseeable future. Galax, did you finish your segment? I don't want to jump in here.
Yeah, I think so. I don't have much else to say. Honestly, I have had a hard time remembering some stuff that happened over the last few days anyway, just because my brain was in operating mode B.
Sure, I get you.
Sub B.
In the wrap up to the previous era, Adam has alluded to something at the beginning of the show that I've been debating for a while, and even though it was technically a gift, and I doubt that there would be any legal problems with it, I've decided that I don't want to use Various' theme song anymore on this podcast. I'm trying to shut the book and close the door on that era of my life. Because while there were a lot of good moments, it wasn't built on a very sturdy foundation. I think it's the best way to describe it. And the events of the last couple of months, the events of this year in general, have led me to the conclusion that it's probably healthier if we just both take a clean break and permanently go our separate ways. So, aside from a couple of completely finished projects that are still up on the YouTube channel, I'm going to be rebuilding a lot of stuff. There's not going to be a whole hell of a lot of holdover from that era. As far as like comics go, I will probably still compile what we have of the Starship Moonhawk comic, because there are other artists involved in that I would like to pay homage to, and you know, our work together was unfortunately part and parcel of that package. And there were some interesting moments there. It's not my favorite thing in the whole world, but there were some good moments there. The Lavenders, of course, is getting a complete top to bottom reboot. Same story, same dialogue, but I'm actually going to fix some transitions and do some editing on the script. I'm not going to contract more dialogue for certain characters. I really can't expand those scenes. I'll just have to make them better in season 2. But there's going to be a top to bottom redesign of the characters and the and various aspects of the world to try to make those webisodes that we're putting together. First of all, we're going to make less of them. Instead of 10, we're going to do 6. And they're going to have all new artwork, and then all new editing and all new effects and all new music for the most part. The theme song I made, so using Filmstro, so that we're going to keep. I made an extended version of it for the opening credits and stuff like that, so we're going to keep that. And everyone else who was involved in the project is definitely coming back, unless there's a reason for them not to. But it's just I want to do it a little differently now that I am in complete creative control of my series once again. Instead of compromising the vision, I'm gonna full Seth MacFarlane it and do my own damn thing. And you know, if that portrays an image of me being an IP hoarder, well, fuck it, I don't care. And that's pretty much it as far as like important studio news. Other than that, we're gonna have. Am I on Blue Sky? Yes, I am. I don't use it a whole hell of a lot because it's kind of small. Yes, I am.
Yeah, I have a Blue Sky too, and I'm mostly just at this point gathering people to follow in it because it's a little harder to follow people, and most of them aren't saying that much usually.
Yeah.
Right.
I actually have some codes if anybody in the audience wants any.
Hang on a second. I don't know who you are. Yeah. not accepting any friend requests from the owned 3D community. Especially unsolicited friend requests from somebody I've never spoken to before. But yes, I am definitely on Blue Sky. I want to use it more. I just, right now, I'm still focused on X because of the fact that until it isn't, well, I do that too, but until it isn't, it's still the bigger platform.
Right.
Until Elon Musk successfully crashes it directly into the core of the Earth and kills us all.
Suplexes it into the sun.
Right. Oh man. But until that happens, I'm still committed to the platform. So that, and actually, I did want to mention that one of the reasons I've been distracted during the news segment here is that I was fucking with the TikTok template in CapCut to try to promote the other channel, which I will be broadcasting on tonight. I do VTubing and kawaii gaming on Up Late with Mace. So expect to see me playing Mary Skelter Nightmares tonight at probably around 11:30 Mountain Time. So that's it for the news segment. Open my window so I have all of my information in front of me once again, so I don't make this mistake twice. All right, so tonight on the podcast, we have none other than Kevin Bunch of the Atari Archive on the program. Kevin, welcome to the program.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, sorry it took so long to get started there. That was, unfortunately, that is par for the course around here.
Hey, it's all good.
Our official slogan for Moonhawk Studios Presents is professionally unprofessional. Like, I've actually stuck the trademark logo on that. Hey, it's a point of pride on TV tropes, okay?
I mean, it's better than From One to Japan, but yes.
Yes. Well, that's Naka's. That he technically owns that one. Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself and your show.
Sure. So I am a video game historian, and I, several years ago, decided I wanted to delve into the history of the Atari 2600 and that sort of general period of, video game happenings. And the approach I was going to take is I was going to look at each game individually, for the most part, and sort of dig into the history behind that game, try and figure out the context around its development and its release. That involves talking to the people who developed it, sifting through old newspapers and magazines and trade periodicals, just doing whatever I can to pull together all these threads and weave it into the story of that particular game. And with that, sort of the history of video games in general, like the genres and the arcade space and the computer space and all sorts of interesting twists and turns that these episodes take me on.
All right. Since I'm apparently having
I was going to say, I guess I could add that this is on YouTube. This is a YouTube video series under Atari Archive. And I do have a book covering the first couple of years of games for the 2600 library, and it's sort of based off of the videos, but expands on them a fair bit because in the intervening years, I've turned up a lot more resources than I had when I made those videos originally.
Right.
So that's pretty cool and on sale.
You have to forgive me. I'm having a little bit of a fade here because of the fact that I've been working a lot of long hours to try to catch up on bills. So since gaming is primarily Adam's wheelhouse, I'm gonna turn things over to him right now, so that way we can actually have a decent interview. And not me just fumbling through, twiddling my fingernails like an idiot.
Right.
So let's get this underway proper. Let's get this underway proper. Sorry.
Well, it's not just video games, but history as well.
Yes, yes, important, very important notation.
Yes.
Since that's what my major was in college. But and there are quite a few avenues I could start here, but now when you say you're a video game historian, do you mean that in a general sense, or do you mean that in like actual historical terms?
I don't like. What do you mean historical terms?
I mean,
It's not my day job, if that's what you mean.
that is one part of it. Um, but also, like, how deeply are you chronicling the history of Atari and the VCS? Are you using primary sources, secondary sources, or
Okay,
is it
I got you.
that kind of thing?
So both. So I have been, yeah, I have been using primary sources where I can get them. There are some documents that I've been able to get a hold of through the Strong Museum of Play and through private collectors who've been able to share stuff. Some of the folks I've interviewed who worked at Atari and these other companies, they've held on to things and were happy to share materials for me. So those have helped sort of develop out, basically my timelines and how everything fits together. But also, yeah, I'm looking at, what were the magazines reporting on? What were the news papers and the trade magazines? Like one of my big sources is Weekly Television Digest, which is a consumer electronics trade that ran from I think the 40s until like 2003. But they covered the consumer electronics industry, right? So they covered video games pretty much from the jump, which means that they were reporting on a lot of insider details that were not being published in other sources. Or I used Merchandising, which was a retail trade magazine at the time, and they look at things from a retailer's perspective, like why should you stock this stuff? How do you sell it? That sort of thing. So those are the kinds of sources I'm really interested in. Like my training and my general career started off in journalism. I worked at various newspapers years ago. So that's sort of the approach I take. I take a very sort of, I don't want to say academic approach, but I want to figure out the whole story and then figure out how it all comes together. In that case, some of these games, they were arcade ports that might involve digging into the history of some of these arcade games, and other people have done that research before me, so I don't necessarily need to just do the same thing they did if I don't have to. So in those cases, I am pulling from books that other historians have written, or blog posts, as the case can be. And if they are willing, some of them have shared interviews with me and their sources for that material. So if I can go to that, great. Same with computer games. I've been able to get some assistance from experts on computer games of the 60s and 70s at a few points who helped direct me towards primary sources from like Bit Savers. Of course, they have a million things on that website. It's just extremely hard to search, but they were able to direct me right to Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC, like their list of programs, which had a ton of games that, some of which I don't know still exist in anything other than just source code printouts. That was really fun stuff. It was really exciting for me to dig into. I know on your Discord you shared earlier one of my recent videos, which was on the first 3 games out of a Magic.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those was Trick Shot, which is a pool game. And I was really excited about that because in my research, I've come across this pool game that was produced at RCA in 1967 for their Sarnoff Labs open house. And I was able to talk with one of the developers of that game back in 2021, and he gave me a lot of really interesting details about it that I had not found, in any other sources. What's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, it's quite late where I'm at. Court papers, and depositions and whatnot, which he and his co-developer Alfred Tager had done. So I was able to pull from that. I was able to pull from the interview with him. There weren't a lot of surviving materials of that from internal papers, because the ones that did exist got pulled off and used for the court cases and never returned to RCA's archives. But as it turned out, there was a film crew, a documentary crew, who recorded the game in action, and I was able to find an upload someone had made of that documentary and able to use that as sort of a visual source. And that wasn't even the first of these pool games. There were a couple earlier ones too. And did any of these, reflect anything on Trick Shot itself, the Magic game? Well, no. Dennis Coble, I talked to him too, and he's like, yeah, I never seen any other previous pool game. I just thought it'd be a fun little challenge. But even if there's not that direct through line, you can look at it and think, well, people were interested in pool for computer and video games. Why is that the case? What is it about this that interested them? So I drew my own conclusion from that and put it in the video.
Indeed, those are good angles, if you will, to approach something like that. And speaking on such topics, do you have a overall thesis statement in regards to the VCS?
I'd say that is a good question, because it is such a long running platform. They're still making games for it. Atari maybe not necessarily, although they've been putting some stuff out lately. But
actually, they just put out their first Atari 2600 game since 1990, and the 2600 version of Mr. Jump and Run, or Mr. Run and Jump.
So
they do have that Atari 2600 Plus now, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I got to try that out at the Atari Party East a few weeks ago, and it's actually pretty good. Would I use it over the old system that I'm still running with since the 80s? Probably not, but I think it's a pretty good alternative if your setup calls for something that can run on a flat screen.
Right.
But yeah, so the VCS 2600, it had a very long life, and it went through various epochs, I guess you'd say, in terms of game design, mentality, and approach. So for me, what makes it interesting is that it's like the video game equivalent of a coelacanth, right? It's this living fossil that just won't die, and people continue finding new ways to do interesting things with it. The videos I'm doing now, they're from 1982, which was 5 years into the system's life at that point. And I'm just now getting into the games that people when they think Atari 2600, those are the games they think of. We're talking about stuff like Pac-Man or Yar's Revenge or Defender or Pitfall. These are games that came
Missile
out
Command.
that far. Missile Command, yeah. These are games that came out that far into this machine's life. And the stuff before that I thought was really interesting because it's very primordial. It's got this very different design mentality to it of looking at these 70s games. Sorry, my monitor just blacked out on me. That's fun. There we go.
Working now, right?
Yes. Went to
Good.
sleep, and I don't know exactly how that affects my microphone, but
Okay,
but yeah.
pop that for just like a little bit of a second. But good.
Okay, so I just have to remember to move my mouse. Okay, but yeah, the early stuff, it's very 70s. I don't know how else to put it. And then you could just sort of see how things shift. Like they're trying to port more complex games to this hardware that is very underpowered, even by 1977 standards. And they're trying to do more complex ideas, like everyone knows Adventure, and what Adventure did in terms of game design, having this like multi-screen, wandering around, dealing with different issues with different items. But even before that, you had Superman, like a few months before that, which did sort of it did similar things, but focused on different aspects. Like it's got an in-game story. Like you start off with Superman walking to work, and then a bridge explodes, and you have to go back and change into Superman and catch the villains, and then you have to change back to Clark Kent and go to work. On top of that, it's got like these cute little animations and whatnot that Adventure doesn't have. Adventure has like a block and some little dragons that can open and close their mouths. So I thought that was really fascinating because before doing this series, I didn't really see people talk about Superman, and then I played it and was really impressed by it, and found an interview that the author of the game had done back in like 2000 before he'd passed away. And I even found some reporting at the time from people who were just openly like, yeah, I thought Superman was cool. I wanted to make a game kind of like that. So that was really interesting to me. So for me, it's like, okay, 2600. It's a machine that people found really interesting ways to make games with, even though the hardware really shouldn't have allowed it. It was just flexible enough that they could, and I think that's really interesting. And I think that some of these games, a lot of these games, are kind of hard to go to and check out with modern eyes without any kind of context to them. So I think that's important to sort of understand why they are the way they are, and what makes them interesting. So that's kind of what I try to do with my videos.
Certainly a noble goal, especially since I won't say that the VCS is a forlorn period of video game history, but it's certainly not as well covered as, say, the NES or the Genesis. I think that's partially down to age, but it's also down to, I think, to the simplicity of pretty much that whole era, but especially the VCS, because compared to any one of the contemporaneous systems that existed around that time, the VCS is limited. Like, not just in terms of memory, but in terms of input methods. Like, I think the most sophisticated controller the VCS ever had was that a keypad thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it doesn't have all the inputs of other platforms for sure. But I have found that the games, more often than not, have more complexity than I think people give them credit for. There's quite a few of these that I had to read the manual to, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's how this like works. Or that's what like sort of options there are in this
Double
game
Dragon.
that make it less kind of a drag.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Double
one of the
Dragon-
first things that goes when you're dealing with a game with very limited amount of memory and stuff is ability of the game to actually tell you anything about itself inside the game.
Mm-hmm. And once you get into the late '80s
Indiana
games,
Jones.
they usually have more in-game menus and they have a little more information because their cartridges are just bigger. But yeah,
Right.
especially for the early stuff, you really need to be able to look up what the heck you're doing.
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T.
Yep.
The
Yep.
game that
Oh,
had such a sophisticated control scheme that it required you to use 2 controllers or have a second player.
Yeah.
Oh, Raiders! Now
Stargate
see that
did
game.
that as well.
That game bombed hard.
Oh God.
I haven't gotten
Yeah.
to it yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
It's winnable,
I genuinely,
but it's hard. Oh my God.
yeah, I genuinely think Raiders of the Lost Ark is a worse game than ET.
You're probably not wrong. I'll put it this way: we have a partial internal memo from Atari showing sales per year. And ET was a flop, but like it still sold a lot of copies. It was still high enough to be in the top, 5 or 10 or something.
I have
That's
2
the thing.
copies of it.
Well, yeah, that's the thing about ET that people maybe get wrong. Like, it's not like the problem with ET financially wasn't that it didn't sell a lot. It did. It's one of the most common Atari 2600 cards out there.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because the big problem was they oversold it.
Well, they overproduced it.
Yes, that's what the term means.
There were a lot of returns, but there also were it's not like they sold a too small of a proportion of the games that they intended to sell, but that's because they made way too fucking many.
Well, the thinking from Atari was that ET was going to be this big system seller. Like people were going to buy 2600s for ET. So that's why they produced I think 7 million carts.
I haven't gotten into the numbers, but I know they sold. I can actually pull up that memo right now because I have it on my computer.
But
if it will load. So for ET, they sold in 1982. Why are you taking so long to load? There we go. ET was there. In this chart, anyway, their 8th best-selling game, and that first year they sold 2.6 million, which is pretty impressive considering it was on the sale for 3 weeks.
Right.
And then in '83, they had a net negative of 670,000 returned. So they sold a lot, but they also ate a lot back the next year.
It's so strange to contemplate these numbers because when you think about it, a Nintendo cartridge post 1985 was considered gold if it sold more than 1 million copies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's wild. So I did a Pac-Man video recently because in my chronology I got up to Pac-Man and I'm very proud of that one because it was very long. But Pac-Man, the common trope or idea was that they made more copies of Pac-Man than there were consoles and it flopped and they had to deal with that. Well, no. They expected to sell about 7 to 8 million copies in that first year, and they sold 7.2 million copies that first year. And they sold less in '83, but that's because in January '83 they started packing it in with the console. So that's why there's so many Pac-Man copies. Every person who bought a 2600 from '83 through I think around '85 had a copy with their machine. So they still sold 600 and I think 84 thousand copies that in '83, and they sold a certain amount in the late '80s. I think it ended up with 8 million in the tracked period, and that's more copies of any home cartridge that I'm aware of sold, not packed in with something until Tetris came along, and that's absolutely bonkers to me. Just that game sold that many copies, or Space Invaders sold something like 5 million. I'm not putting the math together in my head at this hour, but yeah. Just huge sales numbers. Like these are the games are why like the home market exploded like it did. Like it was very moribund and very niche before Space Invaders came along, and that was the catalyst right there. There's a reason Atari had something like 70-80% of the market share, and it was just because of this thing.
Indeed. Like, yeah. I mean, the thing with Pac-Man on the Atari 2600 is it didn't sell poorly. It's just it was poorly designed. You know, like in terms of it being a Pac-Man game, it's an absolutely awful Pac-Man game because it was coded in a very short amount of time and had to work in the limitations of the VCS.
Well, it was interesting because when I was putting together that video, I got to dig into like what was going on with that game, and it's true, Pac-Man is not really a game that the 2600 is built to be able to play. So it was actually kind of miraculous that Todd Fry got it together, but like,
yeah,
I was able to pull together like interviews he'd done with Marty Goldberg and Kurt Vendel when he was still alive, and some of his appearances and whatnot since then. And the way he put it is like, yeah, originally his story has shifted a little bit, but originally he said that he had like 6 months to work on the game. He did it in 5. There were a lot of like long nights, but that was basically him doing it to himself. And he did not like Pac-Man, like the original arcade game. So my interpretation is the things he pulled from Pac-Man that he thought were important to retain for this home version were not the things that anyone who actually liked Pac-Man would have wanted to keep. So like, he thought it was extremely important that this have the 2-player mode from the arcade game. Had to have it. Even today, he insists that this was not something he regrets doing, even though it sucked up a crap load of the paltry RAM of the hardware.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, the 2600 has 128 bytes of memory, and a good chunk of that is going to go just to drawing your screen, and now you have to have another chunk of that to remember what the other player's state of the game is. And so now you have less for everything else basically, and that shows. And also, like, he didn't like the color scheme of the arcade Pac-Man, so guess what, now it's blue and brown.
Well, I think there was also I've also heard that Atari had a mandate that you couldn't use a black screen for a VCS game unless it took place in space.
So, as far as I've been able to tell, the only person who's heard of this mandate was Todd Fry. None of the other people from Atari I've talked to or like seen interviews with are like, yeah, if this was like a thing, it was not a requirement. Maybe someone suggested it to him, but yeah,
it could have been a belief rather than an actual thing.
Yeah. And he has said like, okay, yeah, in retrospect, I should have just kept the original colors. But also, like, this was also a time period where ports to a home console from an arcade game, people didn't necessarily expect it to be accurate, and also the developers like were not expecting necessarily to get something that was 1-to-1 as close as possible.
Well, fuck them, because
Yeah.
I fully expected it, and when the NES came out on the market, I was so thrilled to have an arcade accurate version of Super Mario Brothers and Popeye. Especially
I think
the
it's
ColecoVision version, which was so much closer to the arcade version.
Yeah, I think it's telling that when Ms. Pac-Man was done the following year in '83, that game, well, not only was it done by the same developers as the arcade game, but they had a bigger cartridge space, and they seemed to focus really hard on making it, play and act like Ms. Pac-Man. Like, it doesn't have a 2-player mode, but hey, the ghosts behave like they're supposed to.
Right.
And the maze, it doesn't look exact. It doesn't have the same layout as the arcade mazes, but they're close enough that you're like, okay, well, I can see what they're going for.
Yeah, and Junior Pac-Man's pretty good on the Atari 2600 as well.
Mm-hmm.
What I remember, like, but yeah, I think the main thing about Pac-Man on the 2600 is the development choices plus the rush job than anything else.
You know, the Atari 2600, I got to say really quickly, is a testament to human ingenuity because of what the different developers had to do to those cartridges to supplement the weak ass hardware of the 2600. Like Pitfall 2 adding extra RAM and a separate sound chip built into the cartridge just so you could hear that banging soundtrack throughout the whole game.
It was more than a sound chip. It was a whole coprocessor,
Right.
just to help like build the world. That the idea there was that they were going to use this in all of their future 2600 games at Activision to get like a couple more years out of life out of the machine. And, that was the only one that used it, and they only put out like I think one more game before like abandoning it until like 1989 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And that didn't use the chip because didn't need it. I guess that's not true. They had like two more releases in like 85 that they put out that as games like, oh, well, let's see if there's enough of a market to make this worth our while. No, okay.
I just
They weren't games that they were going to spend money on for new hardware.
I just remember in 91, 92, 93, 94, you know, people praising Nintendo's ingenuity for adding like the Super FX chip and Mode 7 scaling and all that stuff to the Super NES to extend its lifespan. And what was so hilarious about that was that those of us who were alive and cognizant during the original video game crash of '83 are like, we've seen this trick before.
Yeah, the Pitfall 2 drives me nuts because like this is a game that was so ahead of its time in terms of design, in terms of here's checkpointing and here's like an infinite life mechanic more or less, but there's still like a challenge and there's a lot of exploratory elements to it. These are really cool ideas, and because it came out in 1984 when no one was playing when no one was making money off of video games, I should say, like people were still playing them. No one really picked up.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought you cut out or something.
No, I'm still here.
Okay. You were making a point, and I accidentally made an ADHD noise and stopped you.
No worries.
But
yeah, like they did other stuff too. Like there was bank switching, which was sort of doubling the size or tripling, etc., of the cartridges that the system could read at once. People figured out ways to get onboard memory, and even today, now that you can get games that have ARM coprocessors in them, all sorts of fun stuff. And like the hardware was not designed to do this. I've talked with all of the people who are still alive who designed the hardware, and they all complained in retrospect that they should have spent the extra like couple of pennies to add an additional pin line on the cartridge port so you could do this stuff easily. But they found ways to get around that limitation, and yeah, it's truly wild some of the weird stuff people figured out with it.
Yeah, it was such a weird time. It was such a weird time. And you know what's even funnier about it is this is one of those rare exceptions to where the Atari 2600 version of a game is vastly superior to the ColecoVision version of a game. The Atari 2600 version of the game is so much crisper and so much smoother than the ColecoVision version. It's almost bizarre.
It has, I think the best way I heard someone describe it was one of the developers I interviewed, I think was it Bob Smith maybe or somebody,
Hmm.
but the way they put it, they were discussing that versus the Intellivision, why they didn't like the Intellivision, and the way they put it is because for the 2600 hardware, you're drawing everything line by line, keeping up with the computer at that point. So everything has to sort of react instantaneously. That's very responsive.
Hmm.
And other platforms like the Intellivision, there's like a BIOS to go through and a frame buffer and whatnot, and so you get things that don't necessarily react quite the same way. For the 2600, if you're not doing things instantly and quickly, the whole program's just going to collapse in on itself. It's very much an all or nothing kind of machine.
Right.
So I think that worked in its favor. Like nothing else from that period really plays like a 2600.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is fun.
We've also talked about missed potential too, because we've talked extensively on this program, and I think Adam has talked a little bit about it on Fragments, about the Atari Jaguar and what a missed opportunity that was because of how much ridiculous hardware they jammed into that machine and then didn't use 3/4 of it.
Well, that's because it's a titanically badly designed system. With poor documentation.
Yeah, none of the developers wanted to make 32-bit games for the Atari Jaguar. They just saw, oh my God, it's got a Motorola 68,000 modified sound processor. We're going to use that as the primary CPU for our games and do Amiga ports.
Hey, everyone loves an Amiga port, right?
Unless it's Zool too, and then it's just frustrating.
Well, that's European platforming design for you.
Yeah.
And I'll say that, beyond just 2600, I've done like installments on other game platforms. Like I have an occasional series looking at Intellivision games, and I did some on the Fairchild Channel F and the Studio 2 from RCA, and the Bally Professional Arcade, which is a personal favorite machine of mine. Just same sort of idea. Like, can I dig into the histories of these? What are the sources I can get? Can I sort of delve into what makes these machines interesting? Why did they not find the kind of success that Atari did? And what makes them interesting and unique in their own ways? Like the Bally Arcade, or people know it as the Astrocade. That game has like, I don't know, 24 cartridges or something, but it has literally hundreds of games that were written on cassette and were sold or published in fan newsletters as basic programs, or some of them were machine language programs that still loaded up on a cassette. And that's just cool. Like, there's no other home console that has that kind of scene. That's really more of like a computer thing. But because it sort of towed that line and had a basic cartridge that had a cassette interface so you could save and load your programs, people found a way to make really cool stuff and get around the limitations of that basic program, and made some really fascinating stuff and made a really interesting little scene around it. And yeah, super cool. Super happy I was able to interview a ton of those people and get their stories together for that video.
Well, that does beg the question, now that you're in the year of 1982, will you be doing anything with the Vectrex or the ColecoVision?
So the Vectrex would be interesting because that's a difficulty just in terms of recording footage. So like for context, when I'm recording stuff for my videos, I'm pulling from the original hardware. I have a convoluted setup to get the RF out and do a composite signal that is run into a splitter, which goes to a TV and to my capture upscaler and everything. And that's not really something you can do on the Vectrex, because it's a vector monitor built into the machine. So I'd have to
Mhm.
think of a different approach for that.
Yeah, you'd have to do like a.
I wouldn't
you'd have to do
mind.
like you have to do like a TikTok thing where you've got like a camera on a tripod pointed at the screen and find some way to route the audio into it so it's a little crisper.
Yeah, which I have done. I have recorded video off my Vectrex using, my phone camera, and it's a really unpleasant experience, but you can do it. It is an interesting story, and there's a lot of information out there. That would be a cool one. ColecoVision? I mean, maybe. I don't know. I like the ColecoVision, but it doesn't grab me as much. I think because it's sort of in that same generational realm as the Famicom, which is interesting, but it's not as interesting to me as some of the weird primordial stuff.
It
Oh, we'll
occupies an
see.
interesting space. It occupies an interesting space, and I got it. I got mine at a garage sale with like 20 games for $60 back in, I want to say, 85 or so, and I kind of fell in love with the system, but it was difficult to find stuff for it at that point. Now, of course, it's rather ubiquitous, but it was an
Mhm.
interesting system to say the least, because again, you had a little more hardware for more arcade accurate ports, and you had a lot of interesting third party support from Nintendo and Sega on that system as well.
Yeah, you get like the weird stuff, like the games that came out in Canada and just sort of limped their way into U.S. market like a year or two later. You have the MS exports. You have the very like nebulous and ill-defined relationship between ColecoVision and Sega. Like I know Sega was in talks to distribute it in Japan, and that never happened. And then the SG-1000 came along that had very similar architecture. So
Yeah.
there is interesting information there. I have not put it together. I might at some point, but yeah.
Well, Zaxxon
Right now, I'm
was one of the
trying to.
first 3D vector games that I actually liked.
Yeah, I'm trying to get more information together about the Odyssey 2 because that's another one that I find really interesting for like how weird its history is. But wouldn't you
Yeah.
know it, a lot of the hardware designers have passed away.
Oops.
And yeah, some years ago there was somebody selling a bunch of Magnavox paperwork, and no archive I'm aware of was able to get it, which means wherever all the paperwork about the Odyssey 2 internally is, who knows? Good times.
You got to put the word out there for the hounds, but of course somebody will probably try to charge you an arm and a leg for it, and you'll be like,
Probably. Like just send it to the Strong
baby.
Museum. I can go up there.
Yeah, capitalism, baby. That's how that works.
I have talked to some people who worked at Magnavox and Philips in Europe, and I have some idea of it, and I was able to sort of write that up in my book as well, because I did chapters sort of delving into the history of each of these different platforms that came out in that 1977-78 period. Like, yeah, it's a good story. There's stuff to tell there. I just really wish I had more material.
Yeah.
Maybe one day.
Indeed. Though I suppose you will have to, at the very least, address Coleco, considering they were,
Yes.
quite the publisher on the Atari 2600.
Yep. They are coming up. Let's see, where am I at? I'm on. I just wrapped episode 68. Rico's first game is Donkey Kong, and I have that currently at 75. So it's coming. And there's a lot to talk about with Donkey Kong and Coleco's entry into making programmable games. Because they were making dedicated machines in the 70s, and when that market went bust, they just sort of dropped out of console games entirely and focused on handhelds.
Well,
So
Coleco
they have
was,
this very interesting place in game history.
Coleco is a weird company because they did all sorts of things. Like I mean, their name is derived from the Connecticut Leather Company. And that's not even getting into like their 60s with the pools. And the other thing they're known for in the 80s, probably the thing, the Cabbage Patch Kids.
Hmm. Yeah, they made a lot of stuff. They made a lot of toys, especially, which is
They
not
did.
unusual. You know, Mattel Electronics.
Mhm.
Their electronics line. They put out the Intellivision and a whole lot of electronic based toys and handhelds. But they also were putting out regular toys.
Which is what
Hot
which is why
Wheels.
Atari is, you know, like Atari, they were the first video game company. Like, and it is a good time to be chronicling their history because, Atari just turned 50 years old, which means, a lot of the people who were behind those machines are, well, dying.
Hmm. And that has
Like,
been a concern for me. There have been some folks that I've tried to interview that had passed away ahead of time, and some folks I have interviewed passed away since. Aforementioned Bob Smith, he wrote Video Pinball for Atari and went on to a Magic and did a whole lot of other cool stuff in video games, and he passed away earlier this year. Um, Interviewed Ron Stringari, who was an executive at Sears and then Atari, and he left and came back in the Trammell years for a few months to run things. And he passed away last year, which was about a year after I interviewed him too. But he was able to provide like a very interesting perspective from marketing and sales. Uh, so trying to capture those stories before these folks passed away, that's been important to me for sure.
mm. And now, are you hoping to span the entire breadth of the VCS's lifespan with your project
I
here?
mean, my plan is to go with it as long as I'm interested in continuing to do it. So if that runs through the rest of the life of the 2600, that would be cool. We'll see how it goes.
Mm. And are you
I have
seeking
started. I was gonna say I have started putting together multiple games per video, just in the interests of finishing this before I die,
Well,
because
I
there
mean,
are 400 odd games that came out in its commercial life.
yeah, and I think you guys noted in a recent video, 1982. Well, now we're hitting the stride of the VCS. Also, we're hitting the deluge.
Mm-hmm.
This is the period where we get all the fly by nights, um, game developers and publishers, and that part of the video game crash narrative. All of these VCS games that are coming out and are poor quality and stunk the system. The thing that honestly one of probably the most consequential part of the video game crash, because that's the thing that led Nintendo to institute the licensing policy, which is a thing that we have to this day on console.
Which was fun because in Japan they did not have that, and they also came and faced sort of a similar glut of just janky software on the Famicom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they saw what had happened to Atari and were like, okay, we gotta get this under control.
Yeah. The rise of the Kusoge, or however you pronounce that, like,
Usoge,
yeah,
yeah, yep, the crap game.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, some of that was Nintendo's own doing, since they had to get third parties on board. So they had to let third parties do what they wanted to do for a time.
Well, and I'll say Atari did you get some official license. Atari did get some official licenses from other publishers, like they sued Activision and they've settled out of court. And part of that settlement, reported on in the industry press, is that Activision became an official licensee of Atari for the 2600, and so when they sold 2600 games, Atari got a cut. And they did the same with Coleco when they sued them over the Gemini, which was their 2600 clone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a couple of those. It was really interesting to sort of see that information laid out that I had not really spotted anywhere else, but these weird industry trades.
Yeah. Like, though, I'm guessing that just so many licensees, let's call them, popped up that, even the almighty Atari wouldn't have had the resources to sue them all.
And they had that Warner money, so. But I think
True.
at a certain point, is one of those things where, okay, well, these are games being made by people who are not from Atari, and that was the big thing for the Activision lawsuit, is that they were made up of former Atari personnel. And so, hey, did they steal trade secrets or something? Let's take them to court. And a lot of these companies, they couldn't claim that. A lot of them were reverse engineering the hardware themselves. They went after Coleco because Coleco had, clearly ripped off their hardware for the Gemini. And, the 2600 has some custom chips in it, so that would be a fair thing to be concerned about. And they went after a Magic on the weirdest technicality, that they had gotten the rights to do a home version of Phoenix, and a Magic had put out these versions of Demon Attack that had a boss in it. And they're like, well, that's too close to what this is. And they settled that one out of court pretty quickly, which suggests to me they probably didn't have a very strong case, but yeah.
Strong enough, I surmise, because the settlement did happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah.
that could have been just to not drag out litigation.
Right.
Yeah. And Atari was, if nothing else, in this period, and we're talking pre-Trammell, nonetheless, it was incredibly petty. Because, I think the Casey Munchkin lawsuit.
Yes. Yeah. Which was interesting to me, because at that time, their whole thing was that they were suing over, this being an infringement on their Pac-Man, even though Casey Munchkin is a fairly different game. But because you had this sort of unsettled area of law, like what does copyright mean for a video game? Not like a book necessarily, is it? Where if you copy the text, that's a ripoff. But can you copyright the program? Can you copyright a genre? And that was sort of the arguments for that case. And they had a similar court battle in Japan over Space Invaders, if I remember, that didn't get settled until years after Space Invaders had fallen out of the zeitgeist. But yeah, so the Casey Munchkin lawsuit was sort of in that whole vein of that sort of arguments. And the fun part of that is that the Casey Munchkin lawsuit, Magnavox won in the district court, and in the appeals court, put back in the injunction against selling the game pending the final verdict of the lawsuit. And then that verdict, as far as I can tell, just never happened, because the market had shifted in such a way that it became kind of moot. So
right. And
I thought
Magnavox
that was interesting.
Did go on to create Casey Munchkin's Crazy Maze, I think.
Casey's Crazy Chase, which is
it's
a maze game where you're chasing down a centipede and eating it from the back, which, from what I understand, was made directly to trash Atari.
Spite is cool. A very powerful emotion. Like, though the funny thing is, there was, so much more cross development in that age. We had like not just Coleco making Atari 2600 games, but Mattel was there with M Network, and Atari had Atari Soft.
Yep.
Now,
And
is that now is Atari Soft something you're going to be covering in the archive?
So to a degree, I'll talk about Atari Soft when their games coincide with their 2600 counterparts. I think I touched on it a bit for the Pac-Man video because they did Pac-Man on a bunch of other platforms. But for the most part, I think that's a little too far afield for the videos, except when relevant. But it's an interesting sort of thing because all these companies were jumping in. Philips was going to do the same. They got in one of their third-party games on the ColecoVision, and then sort of got out of video games before they did any other ones. Even the folks who were making the Astrocade games, Action Graphics, they worked on games for other platforms too. So yeah, there was a lot of cross-pollination. I think it's because everyone saw how big a player Atari was that they figured, well, we're not going to get that much market share on our own, so we'll at least get some extra bucks if we make stuff for the 2600. And Atari, in turn, is always looking for an extra revenue source, so hey, why not sell some copies of Pac-Man on the ZX Spectrum or the Apple II?
I'm sure it probably worked out for them until the crash. Like,
a lot of them came out during the crash, which is really funny because Atari, it didn't just like fall apart immediately. It took a while. When I was talking with Ron Stringari, he said that he left because they had Warner had their bad earnings report at the end of in December '82, and he remembered Ray Kassar, the then chief of Atari, deciding that he just wanted to stay the course, keep doing what they were doing, not try to shift for this. And Ron was like, all right, well, that's a red flag for me. This is going to go really poorly. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Ron was correct. Ray Kassar's approach failed miserably. And by the time he left, and they did start trying to right the ship, it was not really writing very well.
Well, yeah, I mean, Atari lost a lot of money in 1983.
It was one of the biggest losses in, I think, the history of Warner, certainly, because Warner was used to a certain level of profit for most of its existence at that point. And Atari gave it a really hard ding when everything started turning south.
Modern Warner is now giving it a run for its money, saying, hold my beer, 1983 Warner Brothers.
That's true.
That was more AT&T Warner Brothers, if I'm being honest.
Well, no, I'm saying with all the craters that they're making right now, I would say that they're still giving it a run for its money, even under Warner Brothers Discovery.
I couldn't agree with that because that's all tied directly to the finance, but that's for a different segment. Anyway, now are you planning on covering any of the later peripherals that came out for the VCS, like the trackball controller?
So I know I talked about the trackball in the Missile Command episode. Yeah, when it's relevant, I'll bring them up. Lord knows, whenever I get around to Mogul Maniac, I'll have to talk about the stupid like joypad or whatever the heck it's called, the feet controller. So yeah, that sort of thing's interesting to me. I remember for the asteroids video, I did also talk about the Starplex controller, which mimics the control panel of an asteroid's arcade machine. So that was fun.
Ooh. I never did get my
Yeah.
hand on the driving controller for Night Driver either.
Well, the driving controller is great. I only used it for Indy 500 officially, but there's a bunch of like hacks and whatnot that use that. So that's pretty cool. I do like to bring up when people have hacked a game to use something like the trackball and just sort of like, hey, this exists. It's pretty cool. You should see what people think about these games today enough that they're willing to do this.
Likewise, are you or have you looked at the VCS itself through the ages? You know, not just like the original 1977 version, but the VCS saw a lot of versions throughout the time span. Like the four switcher and the Darth Vader Atari 2600, the 2600 Junior, like that.
Yeah, I forget which video it is in specifically, but when they shifted away from the 6 switchers to the 4 switch model, I did bring that up in that video, whichever one it was. It was in 1981 that they changed it over, if I remember. And I'll probably do the same for the Junior. The Junior is interesting because I learned recently that they were actually selling that in PAL territories. Like a year or two, in 1984, when Trammell took over. He ramped up production of 2600s, specifically the Junior models for European distribution. And I only ever think of it as something that came out in 86 in the US, but it was floating around for a while in other territories that did not have a market collapse. So that's cool. That's kind of the fun history I like digging into with this series.
Yeah. I suppose that begs the question, like, is there any sort of software that got released in PAL territories that didn't come out here?
Yes. From Atari specifically, there's a couple, but they're pretty late in its lifespan. There's a few that mostly came out in PAL territories, but had fairly small runs of NTSC copies that have turned up. Specifically thinking of the Asterix, or however the heck you pronounce it. There's that and a companion game.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think they pronounced it Asterix.
I think so. There's that and Obelix, or Obli, I don't know. But
Asterix and Obelix.
Yes. So as far as I know, those were sold in the US because I have found ads for them in like 1985. But I kind of suspect they were primarily for the Quebec market. I have to dig into Quebec newspapers more. They're not as readily available on the sites I use, but yeah. So those are interesting.
All right. And so what's your upcoming schedule looking like in terms of the archive?
So I try to do stuff well, traditionally I've tried to do stuff at least like once a month. Since having a child, I have not had quite that much bandwidth, so I try to get stuff out. I aim for a month, and it usually has ended up about 5 or 6 weeks per video, which is not ideal, but it is what it is. Coming up next, I have Chopper Command and Cosmic Swarm, so like an Activision Defender clone and a game from Comovid, which is kind of neat. We have heavy hitters. We have Yar's Revenge, Defender, Empire Strikes Back, Donkey Kong, Frogger, Atlantis. This is a good stretch of like pretty solid games and some weird mediocre stuff that's nevertheless interesting. So I'm excited. It's interesting to me in a different way than the early stuff was. The early stuff was like, okay, what the heck was going on here? Why did they make this? And now it's like, okay, how the heck did they make this work on the 2600?
Which is a fair enough question when you get to things like Tunnel Runner 3D.
Mm-hmm. Or even Donkey Kong. Like the system should not really be designed to have sort of diagonal platforms, but he made it work.
I would
Kitchen.
argue strenuously against that, having played the
Gary Kitchen.
2600 version of Donkey Kong, but it does technically function on the 2600. Like,
hey, he wanted
anyway.
to put in all 4 stages. Coleco wouldn't spring for the extra cart space. Because they reasoned, logically enough that they're going to sell millions of these anyway. Why should they spend the extra money and cut into their profits? They're like, okay, fair enough.
It's too bad too, because the ColecoVision version only got 3 stages as well. It didn't get all 4.
Well, getting the cement factory was really rare back in the day. Like, not even the NES version of Donkey Kong has that. But I think the Atari 800 version has that.
Yep. The 800 version has all 4 stages, and I think the Commodore 64 one does as well. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, possibly. And like I said, I know it was rare, but it wasn't unheard of back in the day. Yeah.
Well, Coleco had planned on putting out a version that had all 4 stages for their Atom computer, and then Atari put the kibosh on that because, as they pointed out, we have the computer rights, you have the console rights, so this ain't gonna fly with us.
Yeah, there's a story in the book Game Over about that. As Nintendo CEO Hiroshi Yamauchi personally chewed out the Coleco people over having that version of Donkey Kong running on the Atom, and it showing up at CES. Yeah. So yeah, it was not a good look.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, I think I've run through my gamut of questions. So does anyone here have anything further?
I managed to get
my
2 cents in. I managed to get my 2 cents in during the interview itself. That's my job these days, is to run color commentary and add whatever information I happen to know. So
yeah,
I think
thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on. Always happy to talk about old games, and you can check out my videos under Atari Archive on YouTube, and check out my book if you're interested. It's on Amazon. It's on Limited Run Games store under the name Atari Archive Volume 1, as I'm sure hoping to make more than one of them.
Hey, all right. I mean, maybe we'll have you on the program sometime in the future.
Sounds good.
Anyway.
But when the next book comes out,
there you go.
give me something to look forward to plug. There you go. All right, Kevin.
There you are.
I really appreciate you coming out and hanging out with us. It was a very, very nice time.
Thank you for having me. If you don't mind, I'm going to pop off and go to bed because it is even later now.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for indulging us.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Goodbye.
All right, so folks, that was Kevin Bunch of the Atari Archive. Be sure to check him out on YouTube and check out his book on Amazon when you get a chance. And we'll take a brief moment here to talk about entertainment news, because fuck it, may as well at this point.
I'm not sure how brief this moment will be because we've got quite a bit to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got quite a lot. So
how much time do we have?
Well, let's say 20 minutes. And then I really need to
go
eat some.
Then
I really need to eat some real food and start my other show.
All right,
let's cut it to just one topic here then. I think, considering the topic of discussion probably will need just about all that amount.
Well, yeah. Probably. Let's talk about the big bomb that just dropped.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we cannot avoid it, given that just a few hours ago, it was uncovered by Axios that Warner Brothers and Paramount have engaged in merger talks. Now,
Now, now
the
to be
thing that we
specific here, what happened?
the
Sorry.
thing we
Coordinate.
one of the things we don't seem to know right now is how formal these talks were. We do know that it was a
So-
several hours long meeting, but we don't know if it was a anything beyond like an exploratory idea.
Well, from what I've read, there was a multiple hours meeting between specifically David Zaslav and Bob Bakish, the CEO of Paramount. That was a couple of hours at the Times Square Paramount headquarters, which is 1550 Broadway.
Sherry Redstone was also involved in those talks.
Well, not in this particular conversation, but from what I understand, that there was another separate conversation that was specifically about CBS's role in the overall potential deal.
Well, that's because
So that's what I've read.
Well, there's also other conversations going on
Right.
with National Amusements and some private equity firms.
Right. Specifically, those other conversations are David Ellison on behalf of a major stakeholder in Paramount, Skydance, and Redbird Capital, the private equity firm there. That was the other big player that was being discussed as circling around, specifically National Amusements. Now, the reason why everybody's talking about National Amusements, and this is important here, is because it is the theater chain that was founded by Sherry Redstone's grandfather, who then transferred it to his son Sumner, who then used National Amusements to first take over Viacom, and then in 1994 take over Paramount after he had to take care of a certain Barry Diller situation involving, of all companies, QVC. Yes, that was a thing. But yeah, National Amusements is the then eventually at this point in time is the company that owns only about 8% in actual equity of the company, but most importantly, they own 80% of the voting power in the company. So essentially, you don't have to buy Paramount per se. All you have to do is buy the Redstone family's National Amusements stake, and all of a sudden, you pretty much control the company hook, line, and sinker just like that, without having to buy the overall company. Now, eventually, you would make the moves in order to ensure that you own the company overall, but the first thing you have to do is to get the National Amusement stake, which is what the Ellis and Redbird discussions are about, what I'm assuming the Warner Brothers Discovery Paramount negotiations are about, and possibly what any other suitor that might like to emerge after this Warner Brothers news, because basically the internal buzz is that this revelation of these talks with Zaslav and company this week is essentially Sherry Redstone saying to other companies, hey, we're for sale. We really, really are. We want more suitors in here so that we can get the best deal out of this.
My
Because you
understanding.
talk with Ellison, talk with Zaslav, and you want more people to talk to in order to get the best deal, the best price to cash out on.
My understanding as of 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight was that this was kind of a setup, a prelude, if you will, to luring NBC Universal into the talks.
Yeah, yeah. They're going to be a company that is going to have to be watched next year because they're going to probably make a move of some kind.
Well,
because they're basically the only big...
Especially since Comcast is selling off their stake in Hulu to Disney.
Right.
So Peacock will be their only platform.
Right.
Yeah. So NBC Universal has some problems of their own, and that is they are the owners of NBC.
Right, they can't buy
And-
CBS
Right.
because of
Yeah.
FCC regulations and
Yeah.
SEC regulations.
Antitrust.
Mhm.
Right.
So, though, here's one of the conversations that is going on with the private equity people is talk about splitting up Paramount Global once again. Basically, the second demerge, from what I've read. Splitting up Paramount Global back into basically Viacom and CBS, which is probably what would have to happen if NBC Universal made a grab for them, or they would have to spin off NBC. Like, there's no way NBC
Yeah.
and CBS can be part of the same conglomerate under current rules.
Well, it's like news.
Or-
It's like News Corporation holding on to Fox,
Yeah.
the network specifically, and the sports network
Yes.
and news. Quotation marks.
Right. I mean, Disney could not absorb that part of Fox because they own ABC.
Which they're talking
Right.
about divesting, but that's another conversation.
Apparently that's been put on the kibosh. Like, Iger has specifically said none of their linear networks are for sale.
Oh,
So-
that settles that then. Until his contract expires next year, or until he kicks off.
Right, but once again, that is a subject for another day. Now, the thing that's been missed in the initial wave of conversation about this merger is why. All the focus has been on Warner Brothers Discovery and David Zaslav and, Warner Brothers debts. The thing is, it's not Warner Brothers that's in real trouble here. It's Paramount who's in really bad shape. And I don't think people really know how bad Paramount is right now.
They pinned a lot of hopes on Star Trek and Mission Impossible, and although they have been pretty wildly successful, it's not enough.
No. Because Paramount Global, like, a lot of entertainment companies, spent themselves stupid during the pandemic years and have accrued a lot of debts.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, they put all their eggs into the streaming basket with Paramount Plus and previously CBS All Access. This is why Disney was hurting too. This is like when we talk about the Orville not being renewed, and there was some momentary doubt about Hulu and all of this stuff. It was because Disney dangerously overextended themselves. Now they have the capital to survive it, but the recent movie bombs, the strikes, all of that stuff put a lot of strain on them, so that they're now kind of just in a holding pattern right now. Whereas Paramount was not on great footing to begin with.
And here's the thing. Their market cap has shrunk by 2/3, I believe.
Oof.
Like, just
they're
a
only
couple
worth
years.
10. They're only 10 billion now. They're as far as like company value. They could be snapped up cheap. I mean, Hulu is valued at $8.4 billion right now. Just the stake that Comcast still owns is valued at $8.4 billion. So to think about that, when only 1/3 of a subsidiary company is worth almost as much as your entire studio, you got some issues.
And that is why the sharks are circling around Paramount, because they're vulnerable, and Shari Redstone knows it. So unfortunately, we're in a Fox situation, or a 20th Century Fox specifically situation, where it doesn't matter how much you whine, how much you cry, how much you cajole about it. The principal players in charge of the company want to sell. And Also, Warner Brothers probably looks the most attractive because, you know, while they're bigger, they don't have a big four network attached to them.
Right.
So, in terms of regulatory scrutiny, there might be some of that. I mean, the FTC has been much more aggressive, let's say, about mergers and acquisitions recently than they have in, let's say, past administrations. It's just the FTC has been proven to be fairly incompetent. Like, I paid attention to what they were doing during the Activision Microsoft merger, and well, they're together now, aren't they? And
Right.
that was failure 4 out of 4.
Now, I know a lot of Star Trek fans are freaking out about Zaslav potentially getting control of their precious franchise, but there is a potential silver lining here, as we discussed in the pre-show, and that is that Zaslav does actually want franchises under Warner Brothers umbrella.
True. Like, I suppose a good example, like, I've seen people freak out that he's going to cancel Lower Decks. I'm like, the Harley Quinn show survived.
Yeah, Lower Decks is the best thing that Star Trek has going right now. Strange New Worlds is wonderful. Don't get me wrong, and you know, no disrespect to our guest or anything like that, but Discovery is in this weird. Let me put it this way: the franchise is already realigning. So to have like a limited number of series running at the same time while doing event films instead of very expensive long-running shows with ever increasing actor pay scales. I mean, they tried to keep the cost of Star Trek Picard down, but you know, Sir Patrick Stewart's 84 years old now. There's no fucking way that he was doing that on the cheap if he was doing it at all. I mean, that would be like asking William Shatner, hey, could you take $100,000 an episode? We know you're 93 now, but, you know, could you take maybe only $100,000 an episode to do this series where you have to do a lot of, like, action moves and stuff? And he'd be like, fuck you guys, I'm retired. Unless the show is all about Captain Kirk for 44 out of 46 minutes. And then I'll think about it. But I'm going to need $5 million an episode. You know? I mean, that's kind of the situation they got. The Picard seasons were done at a quote-unquote pittance of $30 million a piece. The cost of a 90s Star Trek film. You know? Of an 80s or 90s Star Trek film. And that was because everybody just wanted to be there one last time.
Yeah.
And it sometimes showed up in the special effects too, because like Picard does not have the best special effects of all the live action Star Trek shows that are currently on the air. I mean, unless you're looking at it quote unquote dumbed down at 1080p. Then it looks great. But in 4K, whew. I've seen it in 4K on UHD. It does not look good.
Well, the important date to be looking for here in the new year is going to be April 8th.
Oh.
That is when the 2-year anniversary of Warner Brothers Discoveries happens. And that is when Warner Brothers is going to be able to officially pursue any sort of merger. They can't do it right now for what else? Tax purposes. Like, I couldn't tell you exactly what the tax purposes are. I'm just seeing in the articles tax reasons. So,
yeah.
I mean, that is probably good enough for the Vest Man, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, considering what he's done in the name of tax breaks.
Yeah, and I'm not going to attempt to defend anything that would go on in the animation side of Warner Brothers because there was a lot of unnecessary cancellations there.
Well,
But
the
as far as
animation
like Mhm.
the animation side of this is really intriguing because we are looking at the potential combination of two of the powerhouses in animation.
True.
We are looking at Warner Brothers Cartoon Network merging with Nickelodeon.
Yeah, that's very true.
Bugs Bunny meets SpongeBob.
Yeah.
Like,
Bro, if you told me that 10 years ago, I'd have you committed.
I mean, it's true. It's true. Let me finish my point real quick here so we can move on.
Right.
But the only thing I was going to say was that if you really look at the stuff live action that they canceled, like maybe Batgirl was really bad. And it was still technically attached to the Snyderverse. So, I mean, given people's response to the dying gasps of the DCEU, maybe it's for the best. I'm really sorry that a lot of fantastic performances from actors that are utterly beloved got clipped, among other things. But
the thing about Batgirl, well, here's the thing. The thing about Batgirl, it was literally too mid. It was a $75 million movie being made for streaming,
right,
which means it was, Zaslav thought it was too expensive for streaming, but in order to actually release it out into the theaters as a tentpole blockbuster meant a lot of scaling up. Not maybe necessarily in terms of production costs, but certainly in marketing.
right.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying. Is while there's a lot of nerd rage, and I say that affectionately. I'm not saying it pejoratively, but there's a lot of nerd rage about a lot of these cancellations. But it's like maybe it was for the best. Maybe when we see Star Trek Prodigy season 2 part 1 on Netflix on Christmas Day, maybe we'll say, "Ooh, maybe it wasn't all it was cracked up to be." There's a lot of things that happen that people are angry about, and they haven't seen the final product. And it's like, you can't be disappointed if you never saw it. You can't be let down if they never release it, right?
Yeah.
But for all the hype that this stuff has received, it's like, well, condolences to the creatives, but this is par for the course. As a creative myself, I'm used to disappointment.
Yeah, and once again, to the some of the people out there on like the social media, it's like, look, nobody on the ground here wants this to happen, but saying it shouldn't be allowed to happen, I'm like, you need an actual argument for that. And I don't mean that facetiously or spuriously. I mean, if the FTC or the SEC or whoever would, or the Justice Department, whoever would bring the case forward to block a merger, they actually have to actually have a reason to do that. And the reason has to be, it's going to restrain trade. It's going to be anti-competitive in a tangible way. It isn't, I shouldn't think that big thing or big thing shouldn't be a thing, or consolidation sucks.
Well, and there is also some truth to the argument that the alternative is that one studio survives and the other one fades away. If they don't merge, then all of the IPs for Paramount and its subsidiaries goes up on the auction block to
potentially
whatever Tom, Dick, and Harry wants to put it into their private collection.
I've seen it happen before,
right? So it's like don't be praying for anarchy. Be praying for something to survive this apocalypse.
Well, I'm pretty sure there will be a surviving company here. It's more a matter of how this is actually going to be playing out.
Right, but I'm just saying a merger is more favorable than a dissection.
Right. But, the question is, who's going to be the actual players here and how much are they going to spend? Because,
Mhm.
going back to the Fox saga, I'm like, the reason why Disney paid, arguably overpaid for 21st Century Fox is because Comcast got involved.
Right.
Comcast made a very heavy run for the Fox assets, and only
Yep.
tapped out when they, when they got it to a very astronomical price. They just said it wasn't worth it, and they still got like Sky out of the deal.
Yep. Which, by the way, is a tactic that is frequently used in auctions.
Yep.
Trying to run up the tab and hope it doesn't backfire on you to cripple your opponent.
Mm-hmm. Like, so
maybe they were doing that to get a more favorable deal on Hulu. Although I would say that backfired spectacularly, considering the fact that 2 years ago Comcast's stake in Hulu was valued at $24.5 billion, and now it's only 8.4. After the cratering of the streaming industry and the realignment of the market values of these services.
I mean, they'll still get 8 million or 8 billion for it.
Yeah, but that's 1/3 of what they were going to get before.
Well, I mean, not really, because the contracts stipulated that this is the earliest that it could happen.
Right, but I'm saying, what if the chicanery in between damaged them? You see what I'm saying? If it contributed to hurting their position, then it was not a wise move. I'm saying that potential exists. I'm not necessarily. I want to be clear about this, that I'm not putting libelous information out here or slanderous information out here saying that this is what they did. I'm saying if that's what they didn't help their position.
Right.
And so
But
others should take note. Others should take note and not do that.
Okay.
The public doesn't. Also, the public doesn't like corporations fucking around and finding out either. We get way too much joy out of watching them fail.
Like, at any rate,
yeah,
it's still early days on all of this.
Yeah,
Gonna be a big story next year.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt. Like, I mean, it's a big story today, but yeah, it's going to be possibly the story of overall 2024. Like,
Yep.
I mean, when we come back on January 3rd, it might be that and what's going on with Disney and Hulu might be the first two things we talk about in the new year.
No. I'm like, if we're not talking about it tonight, I absolutely know the thing we're talking about when we come back. That's the public domain. Like, because I'm like, just to give you a bit of a, this
preview.
Upcoming year, 2024, is the year Mickey Mouse goes to the public domain.
Specifically,
somewhere he should have went 60 years ago, but
specifically Steamboat Willie version of it, not all iterations of Mickey Mouse. To be clear,
no, but
still, that's enough. That's enough that people can do things that Disney has tried to not have done for a long time.
But it's 99 years past 1925.
So, and this has been like the events for the public domain, like even bigger than Winnie the Pooh that happened this year. So we'll get into that, when it actually happens next year.
Right.
Because there's going to be a lot of what can you do? What can't you do? I'm like, but in terms of, but not the only thing that is happening with the public domain in 2024.
Where's my grimdark parody of Steamboat Willie Boys?
I mean, you joke, but that's probably going to be like one of the first things that happens.
I'm aware.
Did
Yes.
you not see the horror movie with Winnie the Pooh?
I'm aware. Yes, that's part of the joke.
No. It's going to be a crop. No, we're going to get Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, Part 3, Steamboat Willie. I mean,
I don't know if I should laugh or look for your address to kick your ass for that.
I laugh knowingly because it gives me joy.
Here's the thing. That's not a joke. That is something that could happen next year. Like, you know, and yeah.
We live in the darkest timeline.
I find it refreshing. Like,
frankly, if they wanted to come up with an adults-only parody of Steamboat Willie and publish that officially in the public domain, I mean, there are plenty of names available.
Yeah. And if you're, like I said, there's a lot to unpack with this one.
Meanwhile, Walt Disney's spinning his grave, and I'm all here for it.
Speaking of which, on the subject of Winnie the Pooh, like, another beloved character from that universe is hitting the public domain in 2024, as Tigger will become part of that, the public domain next year.
Oh boy! Oh boy!
Whee!
I'm like, yep. Like I said,
let's talk about characters that'll be abused in public domain. Oh
man.
Well, I mean, it is.
Tigger is that much younger than Winnie the Pooh?
Yes. Trying to remember the book.
Oh, is he only in the House of Pooh Corner or whatever it is?
The
second book.
I believe that is where he made his debut. That is why he is showing up.
And if you're wondering why the Tigger movie exists,
no, that was Disney.
Well, no, that was one of their attempts to extend the copyright a little bit, wasn't it?
No, it's just they wanted to do a Tigger movie. Movie.
And they do still have like a separate like trademark or trade dress consideration. So it's not a complete free for all.
It's specific presentation. This is the one thing that we keep talking about with copyright is that yes, the base template of a character as created a century ago is up for grabs, but the very specific presentation that Disney made throughout the 1960s forward is quite different from that presentation. So, when people get excited about this, it's like you need to know what you're getting excited about.
Yeah.
Like if you want to make a slasher film starring Tigger, not a whole lot Disney can do about that. But if you want to, basically make your own episodes of the original Winnie the Pooh, Disney might have something to say about that.
Right.
No, only if it's their Winnie the Pooh or Tigger.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm saying is their specific iteration of it is going to be the consideration because like if it's the version, then you're going to have problems with Disney.
Yeah.
The suits will
and going back to Mickey Mouse, the big albatross around that neck is the trademark. Like, Disney will still have the trademark on Mickey Mouse, which means you can't use him as a corporate logo or infer that this is a product from the Disney Corporation.
Right. Again, specifically as designed in the 1960s during the golden age of Disney, so to speak.
Yeah. What it doesn't mean is that Disney gets to sue you if you do something with Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse.
Right.
Because guess what? The corporations tried this. This has actually been argued in the court system all the way up to the Supreme Court back in 2000. and they ruled unanimously that no, trademark cannot be used to create what they called a mutant form of copyright law in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now that unfortunately cannot preclude a chilling effect that you might be worried about using Mickey and getting sued because you're not specking it up right.
Right.
Mhm.
Well,
Like,
well, once again, if you're not using the iconic three circles version of Mickey Mouse, you're probably okay.
Mhm.
right. The thing that you don't want to do right now is use gloves
Right.
because that is not on Steamboat Willie Mickey. That
Right.
didn't come until later.
It's just sad because the IP anarchists, as I've affectionately dubbed them, are just so delighted by all of this, and it's like, well, I wouldn't get too excited because you're not going to just be able to do whatever the hell you want anyway, even if it's in the public domain.
Right. Like, not yeah. Not yet. At least in terms of copyright.
yeah.
Like, you're never going to be able to use Mickey Mouse as what Disney does
Mhm.
because
Right.
they use that in that fashion.
Yeah, and
Also worth noting,
they do use it frequently enough. Although I would say that as far as like corporate logos, they have kind of switched to the Magic Kingdom as their which is something that is in 24/7 365 use all the time, um just because
Right,
of their
but
theme
They
parks.
do, yeah. They do still kind of use Mickey as like their
mascot, but he's not, but like
Yeah.
during the 80s and 90s, Mickey Mouse's iconic three circle head was, or four circles if you
Oh
count
yeah,
the
like
nose,
it's on the credits
was-
for all the old silly symphonies and stuff.
yeah, like it was
Or the title pages.
It was they had a rectangular logo with the lines in it that just had the cutout of Mickey's head, and that's what I'm talking about is they've depreciated that as their corporate logo, anticipating that eventually they were going to either lose the fight or they were going to lose interest in the fight to keep him as their logo.
Mm-hmm.
like, also worth noting, Peter Pan is entering the U.S. public domain next year.
Specifically,
mainly,
the J.M. Barrie version. Oh.
Yeah, I'm like, this is due to the play script being published in 1928.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's one of those quirk things. Also, speaking of quirks, there is a weird quirk with the UK version of Peter Pan, in that it can never go into the public domain because of a royalty agreement with the Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children, to which J.M. Barrie signed his copyright. So they receive royalties from the play in perpetuity, which is a thing you can do in the UK because it's not a constitutional guarantee.
Copyright it's interesting because the constitutional guarantee, copyright is not specifically a constitutional guarantee, whereas the Senate having a concerted interest in preserving national heritage is enshrined in the Constitution. But copyright itself is not. Copyright itself is derived from ideas in the Constitution, but it is not specifically guaranteed. So I want to clarify that. The other specific thing is that the United States and the UK are the only two countries in the world that offer specific punitive damages for, like, financial damages for copyright abuse. I just wanted to clarify that because there's a lot of murky shit in our law. And the Berne Convention does help level the playing field worldwide on a lot of things, but we're still the only two countries that offer financial compensatory damages for copyright abuse. So that's it for the nerd shit. I just
like, and there are other works that are going into the public domain, like Virginia Woolf's Orlando, All Quiet on the Western Front, specifically the German version.
Mm.
Once again, like if you alter a work, that means you create a new copyright.
Right.
But I think I covered what I wanted to really cover in terms of the public domain next year because
Right.
Mickey Mouse hitting the public domain has been like the event that public domain advocates like myself have been waiting for, because this is like one of the characters that got copyright pushed for 20 years. So, and it's the beginning of several iconic characters starting to hit the public domain. Like in a few years, we're going to be having like Superman in the public domain, and so forth.
Yep,
Like
the 30. Yep, we're getting into the 30s. Next couple years, we're
and
getting into the 1930s.
other Disney characters like
Mm-hmm.
Donald Duck and Goofy are coming up, and on Warner Brothers' side,
Yep, and
Porky
Disney's.
Pig,
Mhm.
it isn't too far away.
Yep.
So, like I said,
Look out.
it's going to be
It's going to
interesting.
be a very interesting fight on that
I
front.
can't wait for homicidal maniac Porky Pig.
Yep. Anyway, I think that'll about do it for this entertainment news feast.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're running over 2 hours here, and it was a great show. I'm not complaining. For a year ender, it was good that we ran a little long.
I should note for the record here that during the course of the program here, Twitter was completely and totally down, and it came right back up. So that's
We
how long
broke Twitter,
we've been doing
boys.
this show.
Cratering to the center of the earth, as I predicted, right?
Yep. It completely shut off, and the timeline was "Welcome to Twitter" with nothing going on, and it just came back on just as we ended the show. So that's how long we've been on tonight, folks. Merry Christmas, everybody!
It's a Christmas miracle. And all
Well, it's a
of social
Festivus
media.
miracle, considering that's first.
Yes, there you go. Where we have the Festivus poll and the annual airing of grievances. And the world was silent for but a moment. All right, so we'll be back on January 3rd, and of course we will have, let me bring the list up so that way I can take a look at that. We're going to have Christian Tuttle of Imaginary Game Studios, creator of the Meticulous app, which is a gamified personal health companion that will help you automate your diet and fitness planning. Define your own measures of success, design a custom program week by week to achieve your goals, and become your own personal health scientist. That sounds interesting. Do you have any additional information about that, Adam?
Yeah. Not offhand. Like, I gotta admit, this is a tricky one because we've never covered a thing like this on either program.
Right.
This is new territory. Plus, they never sent. They never sent me a copy of the app, and so like even if they do near the time of the show, this sounds like the kind of thing you would use over the course of a few weeks. But,
right. This will be kind of interesting because we've never really covered like potential infomercial material before.
Yeah. If nothing else, it's an experiment because this is something that came from the gaming side. But it's too much of a non-game for me to consider for fragments.
Right.
Like it's a gamified app, but it's still a personal health app. So, MSP is more of a being the general show that it is. It's over here. So.
Okay. Well, I'm fascinated by it, and like I said, I'm all for trying new and interesting things to try to set us apart from the rest of the pack. So it should be a good start to the new year.
Yep. So.
All right.
On that note.
Yep. All right. Well, again, special thanks to our great guest tonight, Kevin Bunch of the Atari Archive. We got a lot of fantastic material out of that and a very fine conversation. Be sure to check him out on YouTube. And then we'll see you again on January 3rd. So I hope everybody has a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, a happy Festivus. Festivus. It's the holiday
And
for
my
the rest of
33rd
us.
birthday, by the way.
Woo!
Woo.
All right. Congratulations on another
Turn 40
revolution around the
turn-
sun.
Yep, that's right. Turn 33 on December 31st. See y'all in the new year, folks.
All right. So until next time, I'm your host, Mac Paladin. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there, kids. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.